Okay, thank you for coming. We're going to go ahead and get started with our Planning Commission meeting for tonight, April 2nd, 2019. We have all 7 members of the Planning Commission present. Moving into our agenda, we have our first item up on the consent calendar, approval of the minutes from our previous meeting. Commissioner Thomas.
Make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Second. We have a motion from Commissioner Thomas and a second from Commissioner Badon. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Moving into our public hearings, the first item up on our agenda is West Jordan Thrift. This is 7136 South Redwood Road. Conditional use permit for a secondhand store. Green Mobile LLC. Terry Carpenter is our applicant. You have the floor, sir.
I'm just here to.
You're out of time already. Okay, open the public hearing.
Just a second. All right, you've got 10 minutes, so take your time. You don't need to take it off. You don't want to.
We won't need it all.
Okay.
I'm just here looking for a conditional use permit for my thrift store. We're opening at 7136 South Redwood Road. We're just going to be selling secondhand merchandise, some used and some new. Been in business before doing cell phones, so we're just looking to branch off and do something different. Help the community recycle used goods and sell for a cheaper price.
Excellent. Any questions for the applicant?
You've seen
You hit your microphone, please. Commissioner Badon.
I'm new. You've seen the conditions. Is there anything there that bothers you or worrisome?
No,
Thank you.
no, I agree to all 7 conditions.
Any additional questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and save you some time after the public hearing if you need to respond to anything.
Thank you.
Mr. Forsyth is not here, so Mr. Gardner, you're up.
So as the applicant said, he wants to open a secondhand store. As you can see on the screen, it's probably the building. There used to be a furniture store there. I think it is. It's the one just directly north of that, kind of through the parking lot from the Deseret Industries there. And this shows the zoning map, which is SC2, which allows secondhand stores as a conditional use in that zone. And of course, this is the layout. The parking is more than adequate. Parking shouldn't be an issue. This is the space. It's small. It's nowhere, as you can see, nowhere near the size of the Deseret Industries. In fact, it's very, very small compared to the Deseret Industries. And so staff feels comfortable in recommending approval to the Planning Commission for this conditional use permit with the conditions as listed in the staff report.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Green.
It's right, no, stay on that, the one that has the strip mall. So which piece of, so is it between, it's the vacant one between Harbor, or between the,
Like right there.
it's,
See
so,
that one.
okay, so it's Furniture Warehouse, then the vacant one. All right,
I did.
Between the furniture store and the pawn shop.
okay.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I think the pawn shop's the big one.
Yeah, the pawn shop's the big one.
Any other questions? All right, this is noticed as a public hearing, so we will go ahead and open up the public hearing. If you have any comments or remarks you'd like to make regarding this item, please come forward now. All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring this back to the Planning Commission for discussion. Commissioner Green.
So I'm going to throw out, how could a secondhand store be worse than a pawn shop? So with that being said, actually, I just lost the document. Never mind, I was going to make the motion, but
While you're doing that.
there it is. Based on the information and findings set forth in the staff report and upon the evidence and explanations received, I move that the Planning Commission approve a conditional use permit for West Jordan Thrift located at 7136 South Redwood Road in an SC2 zone with conditions approval listed on page 2 of the staff report.
Commissioner England.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Green, a second by Commissioner England. Any discussion to the motion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you for wanting to do business in West Jordan. We appreciate it. Moving on, item number 3, Salt Depot, 5476 West Wells Park Road, conditional use permit for outdoor storage and salt sand piles in the drinking water source protection overlay in an M1 zone. Salt Depot, Darren Lorcher. I know an Emery Lorcher, and not Emery, but I know her partner anyway. And I couldn't remember how to say the name. Go ahead and tell us about your project here.
So what we have here is, I bought a building next door to my existing facility where I have 5 acres already that we've been operating out of there for about, I want to say this is our 11th year, might be the 10th. So what we've done is we bought the building to the west of us we're talking about tonight for expansion of our current facilities. The one thing we're not going to do on this that we're doing on the other one is we're not going to be stockpiling salt or sand. It'll only be finished product that once it's bagged and put in a pallet. The facility has a much bigger building. Where we're at right now, I have 3 bagging machines in a building, and I can now add up to 8 bagging machines in this building. I haven't yet, but we plan on doing it. With those machines, I'm able to bag per machine about a semi-load about every 40 minutes. So if I have 10 machines going, I should be able to do a load about every 2 to 3 minutes. So we've been rapidly expanding. We just picked up all of Walmart from the Mississippi to the West Coast because of this last winter, everything going on. So I actually am going to be expanding machines into that building a lot sooner than I had thought because of that. So, anyway.
Awesome. Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I just have one question.
Commissioner Thomas, go ahead.
The semi-trucks, when they are unloading, are they unloading out onto the open property, or are they loading inside the building?
No, if you see where the yellow outline of this building is, look directly, I guess, to your right. You see that big white spot on that asphalt? That's where we're dumping, and then we push it into a building before it's loaded into the silos.
So that'll still be stored where it is right now? It's not going to be changed?
Yeah, that is on the existing facility that we've been on for 10 years. I actually just repaved that whole yard last year because it was all those people out there in that whole industrial park have used Altaview concrete up the street to pave their parking lots. It was nice, but it was not very gentle with forklifts, so we overlaid it with asphalt so that I wasn't beating up my forklift so much.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions for the applicant? Okay, we will go ahead and reserve some time for you after the public hearing. Ms. Elgin.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mr. Lorcher gave a really good description of his project, so I'll just get on with some of the more technical stuff for us, if I can make the computer work. I don't even know what it did. Go to the next slide. That's at the end. That was the building in question. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, right now there is no proposal to change the facade, the traffic patterns, the noise, the lighting, and they are providing almost 4 times the off-street parking that is required for the project. Code doesn't require any additional landscaping or screening, so they are in compliance with the code and their request. So we recommend approval of the conditional use permit.
Commissioner Hatch.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to touch back on where would the trucks be loaded? If the semis are coming in, where would they be? Is there a loading dock? Where would that be? Is it on this property or is it on his adjacent properties?
They're on the adjacent property. I have
Because just
Could
speaking
you
to the
need to come up to
microphone.
the microphone, please.
On the, if you, it can pull it back up, but it's on the adjacent property, so when we have van trucks coming in, I have 3 loading docks, so it's in off the street.
Okay, that was just.
And then flatbeds as well, we do them inside the property as
Okay,
well.
thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, we'll go ahead and open this up to the public as well. If you have any comments or remarks regarding this item, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the Planning Commission for further discussion.
Is this the sound of silence? Simon and Garfunkel gonna bring it?
I think we talked about this already. Commissioner Green.
I'm gonna at least say this. So, we talked about this in the pre-meeting. I think our biggest concern is that and I don't wanna tie the two pieces together, but they're tied together because the salt's dumped on the in the pile, and it's gonna be hauled into the building at 5476. We understand that the pile of salt is out of compliance with the current conditional use. So what I think there was some concern in the pre-meeting is what guarantees do we have that if you have a conditional use already on a piece of property and you're not following the conditions for the conditional use, what guarantees do we have that the conditional use on this one will be followed? I'll say that out loud. That's my concern with this, is that if the property owner has got conditional uses and we're not in compliance, then how do we keep all of them in compliance with the conditions? And so I'll say that out loud.
Are we asking for a response from the applicant or just wondering out loud?
I'm wondering out loud. I'm not asking for a response.
Any other discussion?
I'll ask Duncan how he feels about that.
Keep in mind that when you have applications, you treat them independently. And if there is an issue with the other application, which is not before you today, then the proper response would be to review and potentially suspend or revoke the other condition if it was not ameliorated or brought up to compliance. The issue before you on this other conditional use permit, having that in mind, you could add as an additional condition to the 5 that you already have, maybe a 6th one that requires review after 6 months or whatever. Might be one way to do it. And then if you feel confident at that 6-month point, then certainly you can decide not to further review or continue to further review depending. And then also keep in mind, you're the Planning Commission. There is also a stormwater program. We have a program manager and a number of employees whose job it is to follow up on these issues. And so, that would be the other thing, is you might want to make sure that, or give your recommendation that those city employees continue to monitor both the prior application plus this application.
And I'm gonna jump in here. I'm just gonna add that here's my concern. And I agree with you 100% that we can add an additional condition. And maybe that's what we need to do, because my concern is that salt's on the one piece of property and we're dragging it over in to be loaded into the machines. I'll just, when we get to the conditions, there's another condition I think I'll add. I think we have to, from my perspective, I'm wondering if we shouldn't have some condition that requires, because if you're using I'm assuming you use a front-end loader to move the salt, or something like that.
Can I address that to you? How that salt is moved?
I'm gonna move to suspend the rules so we can answer that question.
Second.
So two
Wait, so did
things.
you have a vote on that motion?
We need to vote on that too?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Oh, so make that a formal motion and have
Kelvin moved that we suspended the rules. And
okay, I
seconded,
think it
yeah.
was a second, you just needed
Yeah,
to vote.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
So I think number one, I want to start with, how am I out of compliance? And I can probably answer the other question I think you're trying to wonder, how am I going to get salt through that building without making a mess everywhere?
I think we need to just
Yeah,
address this application and let staff worry about that.
That's exact my question, is salt moving from the pile to the building and not get salt everywhere?
Okay, so that's why I'm asking and wondering if I'm out of compliance, but I can answer the second question, how we're getting it to this one we're talking about. So as it's dumped there and we push it into a shed to keep moisture and everything off it, because the salt is dried, I don't want it wet. It needs to, because if I put wet salt in a bag, it'll turn into a brick. So it needs to stay dry. So yes, we're dumping it there, pushing it into a shed. From there, that picture's awful small, but I have two different hoppers that we hurry and dump it in. And then it goes into a series of bucket elevators and screw conveyors. So once it goes into that hopper, it never sees daylight again. And same thing, when I come over to this new building, we will have a screw conveyor that I'm not gonna add any more silos. We'll use the same silos we have, same loading apparatus. We're just gonna carry it overhead so I can have semi-trucks drive under it, and it'll be completely enclosed. And then when it goes into the machine, it goes right into a bag. Yes, we could get some spillage under the bag. I may get in a 10-hour shift a 55-gallon drum of spillage right underneath the machine inside the building. It's gathered back up, put back in the pile, and ran again. So there is no mass pile outside anywhere.
So can I ask one question? Have you received notice?
What's that?
Have you received any notice from the city that you're out of compliance?
No,
Okay.
and
Thank
that's
you.
why I was wondering why I'm out of compliance at all. So,
The one that I was gonna make the motion on, I don't have to worry about, so. I don't know, I don't know how much I'm worried about following this one up, given what I just heard.
Let's just do a motion then. Commissioner Hatch.
I'll make a motion then. I move that the Planning Commission approve the conditional use permit for the salt depot located at 5476 West Wells Park Road in the M1 Light Manufacturing Zone District, subject to conditions 1 through 5.
Commissioner England.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Hatch and a second from Commissioner England. Any discussion to the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries 7-0. Thank you for your business. Moving on to item number 3. This is Brinkerhoff Bluffs, 7653 South, 1300 West. Request for a preliminary development plan, preliminary site plan, and preliminary subdivision plat. 23 single-family lots and 14 senior housing lots on 8.85 acres. And a PRD with an SHO overlay. Cannon Company, Gary Cannon, you're up, sir. Welcome back.
Thank you. I love you guys. I'm pleased to say that I have everybody on this, behind that desk on speed dial. So for 3 years now, you've been able to hear me give my spiel. And I also need to let you know that I'm fortunate that the second and fourth Thursday of every month, I get to sit where you do, except in Riverton. So I'm very appreciative of the volunteer effort that you guys put in, and I know what that looks like from a firsthand experience. I'm a West Jordan business owner. I own a small real estate company at 9089 South, 1300 West. I'm also my grandparents moved to West Jordan in the 20s, and I'm very thankful to say that my business that I now work under is on the same ground that my grandparents farmed in the early 20s. Very, very excited to come to you with this final presentation on Brinkerhoff Bluffs. This has been, in no stretch of the imagination, a challenging project to put together. Very, very pleased with the input that we have received from the current commissioners as well as the former commissioners, and I'm excited to get the input of the new commissioners as well that have just came in. What's unique about Brinkerhoff Bluffs is it's a mixed use of single-family homes as well as a senior with the senior housing overlay. When we originally started this, we were upwards of 50 doors or 50 units. And as you can add up together right now, we're at 37. And I'm not complaining about that. You know, most developers would come in here and start talking about the economics. I feel like the reduced numbers that we continue to come up with are making the project better. I would certainly discount the fact if you guys try to knock any more off tonight, though. A couple other things that I'd like to point out. The all perimeter lots to the east and to the north are all view lots. Now, some may question the viability of a view lot overlooking the treatment center, but we are willing to take that risk because as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the best kept treatment centers, if not in the valley in the state of Utah. And as you can tell, the people to the north who have the $500,000 homes haven't seemed to be complaining about it too much, so we're willing to take that risk. Could we move on to the next slide? Let's keep going. Keep going. I want an overall concept. Okay. This is after quite a bit of work, we with a ton of input from your administration, we've put some amenities in here. I'm also, like I told you, I'm also a realtor, and I don't want to compare this to the Daybreak community, but in the last couple of weeks, I've been fortunate to show a young couple homes in Daybreak, and my misconceptions of what Daybreak originally started out and what they are now have made me appreciate the walkability, the liveliness of being in a neighborhood. We've tried to incorporate that into Brinkerhoff Bluffs. A couple of the amenities that we have added, if you'll go with me here for a moment. This road here originally was about over into here. Upon this staff's recommendation, we have lined it up with the subdivision directly across the street. We have widened the road to bring it in conjunction with the property to the north and to the south with the new apartments, the Colosimo apartments here. Mr. Brinkerhoff is, fortunately, he has decided to remain on the premises, on the property. We've done a second access here for emergency and fire access in the event that there is ever a problem. That all meets city standards. A couple other amenities we're very proud of. We've made a pathway or walkable gate over to here that will access Gardner Village, which we think is pretty cool. We've also made a round trail walkway that will give the benefit of the not just the residents of Brinkerhoff Bluffs, but all of the neighbors, the ability to utilize the park and the amenities that we're creating. But what I'm most proud of is we've incorporated a dog park into the project. And I can tell you, I didn't realize the size of this dog park until I was in Daybreak the last couple weeks. And this is about 3 times larger than any dog park that I saw in the Daybreak project. I believe, Kent, you can help me out here. Is it around a half acre or just shy of a half acre, the dog park? I can't recall exactly. I know it's quite large, though.
I haven't measured it.
Okay. But it sits here, and so to make it viable for the other residents and neighborhoods, we're doing a block wall through here, but we're leaving this with block and wrought iron with accessibility to 1300 West, so it'll invite the community to utilize the dog park. We also have a natural spring that runs under 13th West. We have incorporated that into the project as well. We're going to leave this natural native vegetation here with the trees. All these are the senior housing. They will all have walkout basements and small yards, as you can see in that. They will be all governed by, the whole project will be governed by an HOA. The single-family homes, the front yards will be taken care of. The senior homes will have the front and backyards taken care of, so the maintenance will be covered by that. Our density requirements, I'm trying to do such a great job that you guys have very little questions, if any. Our density requirements were having 15% open space, and we are just shy of 25% open space and green space area. We are, and this is something I'm not proud of, but we are, believe it or not, but we're probably thinking the starting price of the homes in here will be around $400,000, and some of them may approach $1 million on the larger homes. We've already got one sold that's pushing 700. So, and we're planning on, my wife and I are planning on moving into it as well, and maybe moving my parents into one of the senior housing. I know I look like I'm a senior, and I'm almost there. 9 months.
You'll be ready when this is ready.
What, pardon me? I'll be ready when
this is
it's ready. That's correct. But I am open for questions, and I'm excited to answer them for you.
Thank you. Commissioner Green.
Okay, so my first question is the 14 senior houses, what size piece of property do those 14 sit on? Because their density can't be any higher than the PRD.
Correct, and they meet the ordinance perfect as far as the side yard requirement and the back and front yard.
I'm not worried about the side yard or the setbacks. What I'm worried about is that the senior housing overlay has to meet the same density requirement as the underlying zone, which this one's a PRD. So what I'm trying to get at is, are these 14 houses, what's the size piece of property, so that we can determine if they meet the 5.5 density requirement for the SHO?
I'm going to refer to Kent on that, if I may. We've worked diligently to get it there, so I can't say specifically, or maybe Larry can answer that.
Yeah, Commissioners, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this point. It does say in the code that the senior housing overlay shall meet the same open space requirements as the underlying zone. However, I'm not quite sure how we separate where the senior housing overlay begins or ends versus the open space for the single family.
I'm not talking about the open space. I'm talking about the space and the number of units per acre of the actual multifamily homes, and the number of units per acre that we have on those multifamily homes. Because that density has to be the same as the underlying. We can't have seven units per acre in the SHO with the PRD at 4.8. They all have to be 5.5 or less. And so, because it has to meet the density of the SHO has to meet and I don't see how I can determine how, so that's the question, is what's the acreage of these 14 houses so we can determine the density of the senior housing.
So, and I think, Calvin, when this went to the council, now, I'll verify this, I don't want you to stop your motion tonight, but we overlaid the senior housing on the entire piece of property. And so then we can look at it holistically as one whole project, and the density will not exceed the PRDM, you know, rather than try to parcel out a half acre here or 3/4 of an acre, we'll just look at the whole thing, and then the density will not, yeah. And so that's the reason that it was overlaid the whole piece of property rather than trying to be lot specific as it was at one time. Now, I'll verify that and report back to you, but I'm sure that that's the way it turned out. So.
My recollection was that when we presented it to the council, it was combined, both the single family and the senior housing together to get up to that mark.
And I think the reason is because you brought up that same point at the zone change at the planning commission, so, I'm sorry I'm not more up on this tonight, but that's my recollection, the same as what Jay. And so the density for the whole project is within the PRD, and you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Within the
Commissioner Green,
PRD.
I can confirm it, I'm looking at it right now, the SHO is over the entire area.
Okay, yeah, because the original motion from this body was that the SHO was based on the concept plan. And so they modified that to do the SHO over the entire piece of property.
Yes, and the council, that is, land use map amendments and zone changes are purely at their discretion. You're a recommending body, and so that's what they chose to do. So.
And I understand that. I just wanted to make sure that we're clear on that.
Any further questions? Commissioner Hatch.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for you as far as maintenance water issues. I live in an HOA, and we always have issues with our common areas, paying for water, we are not on an individual meter, so it's all combined together. In looking at this, it looks like every home will have its own water meter, I'm assuming. Then who covers paying and maintenance for the dog park and the park if it's open to the public?
The HOA, the residents would cover the dog park
So even
maintenance.
if it's open to the public are going in and using this, the HOA will be required to upkeep, maintain, pay to maintain? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Can we make that a condition? Can we?
Absolutely. And I think we have that in our development agreement.
We're allowed to, are we?
That's already city
Okay, all
policy.
right.
So.
It's a very
Thank
good
you.
question. Thank you.
Do you have another comment? Okay, Commissioner Green.
So I got to go back because I didn't count. So we have 14 senior houses and how many?
23.
23? So we're at 37? And is that the same that we approved, that we did the last time? Is that less?
No, you approved considerably more than that. We've reduced the density.
It was 38 before.
Oh, was it 38 before on the
It was
last
20,
concept plan?
well, it was 20 and 18, I think.
Okay.
Okay, we'll save some time for you after the public hearing.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, what else do you have for us, Mr. Page?
Thank you, Commissioners. This is the aerial. I'm sure we're quite familiar with the general surroundings of the property next to the South Jordan water treatment plant and the new apartments, Jordan Valley Water Reclamation. Sorry.
What it is, it's a sewer treatment plant.
Yeah.
There's some water and it's being treated there, we got it.
Okay.
It
So-
doesn't matter what it's called.
We've asked the developer or the applicant for a site plan, and this is what he's provided. This is for the senior housing overlay for the proposed 14 units. This is the proposed preliminary subdivision plat. As you can see, there's a number of comments that staff has made that we would ask the applicant to address. And then the development plan also has some questions. Ultimately, the development plan and the subdivision plat and the site plan need to be unified. There's been some discrepancies about exactly what acreage is going to be included. I think we've pretty well concluded that the boundaries here in this development plan will be the boundaries for the site plan and the subdivision plat. An unknown question right now is the amount of open space, exactly where that's going to be located. And that's up to, planning commissions and the city council's determination of what clearly is defined as open space. Some of the parameters that the code gives us, that like slopes greater than 30% cannot be considered part of open space, but yet it also talks about that we should preserve natural amenities, such as springs. So in this situation, we have a natural spring with some slopes over 30%. So we've encouraged the applicant to reduce the 30% slopes as much as is reasonably possible while still maintaining the natural amenity of the spring. So the biggest question we have for the applicant to define is exactly what he wants to be calling as open space and where that will be and what the acreage of that open space will be, so we can calculate if he meets the bonus densities. We believe that he's probably right close to, or in the ballpark of being in the 3.1 to 5.5 dwelling units per acre, which is allowed in the PRDM zone. The applicant's provided some drawings of what they're proposing for lighting and benching, and has proposed some renderings of the architecture for the single family and the senior attached homes. The applicant met with the design review committee the end of February, and the design review committee made some recommendations to the planning commission, such as incorporating porches to the front of the senior housing properties. Also we need four-sided architecture for the senior housing overlay properties, which hasn't been provided yet. So there's some loose ends that we believe we can clean up with the final subdivision plat and the final site plan, which can be approved by staff once it's the preliminary is approved by the planning commission. The development plan, however, needs the preliminary approval from the planning commission and the final approval from the city council. So it's the city council's the final, they approve the development plan.
And the planning commission aware of this, you're recommending body now on development plans to the city council. They preliminarily approve the development plan, then the final development plan is approved at the staff level.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Hatch.
Thank you, Chair. Brinkerhoff still lives on this property, is that correct? On that, what is this, yeah. What business does he do there? Does he have farm animals? How will this interact with the community?
The property of the Brinkerhoffs is zoned rural residential, half-acre lots, so I'm not quite sure exactly what use he is doing. One of the requirements of the code is the side setback for the single-family lot immediately to the east of the Brinkerhoff property will need to be 8 feet instead of 5 feet. That's into consideration of the rural residential zone that the Brinkerhoff property will be remaining.
So we don't know what he uses his property for, if there are animals or.
Yeah, Gary could probably.
I can address that. Mr. Brinkerhoff is retired. He does not have any large animals. He's more of I think Mr. Commissioner Thomas could address it. He's kind of a tinkerer type of guy, and that's part of the reason for doing the large fence, because we don't want to the fact that he'd like to remain there, we're making that
He
so
has
that
a
he can
shop
do so.
behind that house that his son lives in. I don't think he runs a business out of there anymore, but he does have an auto mechanic shop in the rear of that house that'll remain.
I believe you're right.
Commissioner Thomas.
I had one question for staff on the road
You
widening.
can have a seat, Gary.
This is directed towards staff. So, on my understanding is it'll be a third lane, correct, at center lane?
Yeah, 11300.
From-
David, why don't you?
Yeah, I can answer that. It will match what's currently in front of the South Valley property, which is 3 lanes.
And that'll continue on all the way to 7800 South, correct?
Well, it'll continue on in front of this property. I believe there's a city project that's in the works that will continue all the way to 78th, yeah.
Because
But with this particular project, we are getting the widening in front of this particular project alone. This project's not gonna be extending it to 78th.
But my understanding is the Closimo is also widening that area, and then that'll bring it right up to where the Maverick is, which is 7800 South. Is that my understanding?
I'd have to double check and be for certain, but I believe that's a city project, the piece that's in front of, the piece between this down to 78th, anything that's not at full width would be a city project. That's
Okay.
on the radar to be completed. Scott, you're shaking your head. Do you know if that's the timing on that?
So the council asked a very similar question last week, and the city just secured, or is in the process of securing another, I think $4.8 million from Wasatch Front Regional Council. So the total so far is near 15 million to complete the road widening, road improvement project for 13th West. It's still, from Dave Murphy, still a couple years out though.
Is it?
No? Oh. I'm like, unless you know something different. That's what Mr. Murphy from our Public Works Department indicated last week to the council.
Yeah, I mean, this is not conditioned to this project, but I just was kind of curious because I know that was one of the main concerns, and that's probably why it was brought up to city council last week. And I know, talking to some of our city council members, that is a major concern of the neighbors right there, of traffic congestion, because it's horrible. So, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, we'll go ahead and open this up to the public. If you have any comments or remarks you'd like to make on this item, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring this back to the Planning Commission for further discussion. Commissioner Green.
I'm convinced that we're inside the PRDM. I mean, we're talking about 37 units on 8.85 acres, so I think by my calculation, we're 4.1 units per acre, plus or minus. So the units per acre, I don't think concerns me. Mr. Page, you had a concern about the open space and whether we're right at the 15%. The applicant said 25. I guess my question is, are we measuring the actual open space on that entire area on the north side minus the 30% slopes that are down on the eastern edge? Is that what we're doing?
We've asked the applicant to provide a description exactly of what property they want to call as open space. One of the submittals that was not an official submittal was calling for all of the property on the north and the property on the west of the senior housing overlay, between the senior housing overlay and 1300 West as open space. Staff's opinion was that the property between the 1300 West and the senior housing overlay would not meet the merits or description of the open space as defined in our code. Staff's opinion is that most, if not all, of the property to the north side of the senior housing, where the drainage area is, could be considered open space, but that's somewhat of a discretionary call on your part and the city council's part. There are some slopes that are above 30% in that natural drainage, but yet it's a natural amenity. So it's a little bit subjective. They call for native vegetation, and I know that makes some people a little bit nervous of what native vegetation could be. That could
Weeds.
yeah. But right now, at least from when I've gone and inspected the property, it looks pretty nice according to my opinion.
So I can almost stretch I mean, that's kind of a little piece of that stuff along 13th West. I know that the ordinance specifically excludes 30% slopes as part of the open space calculation, if I recall the ordinance right. I also, if I recall the discussions on when we looked at the minutes, it was a year ago. So when we talked about this a year ago, it seemed to me that one of the right-of-ways, I think a utility right-of-way can't actually be considered as part of the open space, and so I'm wondering how that affects this. I share the same concern with you. I'm not sure if we're actually at the 15%. I know the applicant said 25. Can I move to suspend the rules to have the applicant come back up so we can ask some questions?
We have a motion for Commissioner Green, a second by Commissioner Thomas. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
So, Gary, will you tell us what your thought is on the open space and how you come up with the 25% versus the staff saying it's close to 15?
I would have to respectfully disagree with the fact that we cannot use the high voltage Rocky Mountain power line that goes through the open area as open space. I can't think of a better use for that than to have it be open space. I don't. It's not a variable item that you can just move. These are big power lines, and we as developers are taking it upon ourselves to develop around those power lines and make it an amenity. I think that may be part of it. Part of the other open space is the part that does come out onto 13th West. I don't believe we've included any of the east additional ground between the east property line and the North Jordan Canal in that calculation. Is that correct, Kent?
Correct, but we just need to define exactly what you're wanting to call open space, what you're not calling as open space.
So I would dare, say that any of the property that you can see around the 10 SHO townhomes, east, north, and west can be considered open space, as well as the dog park.
I'm just gonna look at the ordinance to see what we can do for open space, and then
Commissioner Luthi.
I don't know that this is even an issue, because it's listed as one of the conditions in here that they have got to meet the open space, so I don't see why this can't be something handled between you getting staff what they've asked for and meeting their requirements. I feel like that should be enough to put this down.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest that we can take care of our business tonight, and then when he finishes a study, he can present it to council.
It's already a part of one of the conditions. It's already in here, so let's move on from it, and it says they have to meet it. Staff can make sure they meet it. And
council is gonna do a final review on the development plan anyway.
so I propose let's move on from this topic.
Commissioner Badon.
I have two things that are important to me that I appreciate. I appreciate the mixed use concept here, where I can have my family living in the interior of this, and when my children move away, I can move across the street to the senior housing. I think that's a great plan for the city to try to look at ways to not make me move somewhere else. I can stay in the community. I think that's a great idea. The other thing that I appreciate was the number of porches. Where we've got a contained community here and trying to develop a neighborhood, it's marvelous to have porches where people can walk and wave and talk and communicate. Houses that don't have porches means that I have to go inside and I don't have a relationship to the neighbors. So I appreciate what this development has done for those two factors alone, so thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to real quick, and I know my time is passed, but we've we've developed a concept where you can have apartments for the first time a married young couple. We have single-family homes, second home move-up buyers. We have a retirement community where you can own your retirement home. And then within a couple hundred yards, there's also a cemetery. So within about a half mile of each other, you don't have to move. It's kind of convenient for the family. That's a good joke. I love using that one. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Thomas.
I just wanted to make a quick comment, and first of all, in full disclosure, I met with Gary at the very beginning of this onset, me and my wife did, and he approached myself, my wife, and some of our neighbors, had a couple of town hall meetings with Gary, and he was really receptive on listening to a lot of our concerns, and seeing what he's worked with staff and stuff. I think this product has come down a long ways from where we originally started, but I just wish that a lot more developers would actually take in mind to contact the community around them, and it would make everybody's job a lot easier.
We contacted the neighbors before we started the process, just for those of you who are not aware of that.
Yeah, we discussed that. Thank you. Any other discussion? If not, I will go ahead and make a motion. I'm going to go ahead and make the motion. Based on the information and findings set forth in the staff report, upon the evidence and explanations received today, I move the Planning Commission approve the preliminary site plan, preliminary subdivision plat, and forward a positive recommendation to City Council for the preliminary development plan for Brinkerhoff Bluffs PRD located at 7653 South, 1300 West, and the PRDM SHO planned residential development, medium density, with the senior housing overlay subject to the conditions of approval 1 through 15 on pages 2 and 3. Commissioner Thomas.
And I'll second that motion.
We have a motion with the second. Any discussion to the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Gary.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.